It was a quiet morning in the Midlands of early colonial America, long before the bustling towns and trading ports became hubs of activity. The mist hung low over the rolling hills, carrying with it the chill of an early spring that had yet to awaken the earth fully. Birds had begun their tentative morning songs, hesitant and scattered, as though aware that this day would unfold differently than any other. The village at the edge of the woodland, barely more than a cluster of wooden cabins with thatched roofs, stirred slowly. Smoke curled from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood and the faint tang of salted meat being prepared for breakfast. Children, wrapped in coarse woolen cloaks, ran barefoot over the dew-laden grass, their laughter a soft, fleeting echo in the stillness. But beyond this seemingly serene morning, the land bore memories of tension that had long been simmering. Tales passed down among settlers spoke of skirmishes with neighboring communities, disputes over hunting grounds, and disagreements about trading routes that had escalated quietly but persistently over the years. In the quiet, one could almost feel the anticipation, the almost imperceptible murmur of unrest that clung to the wind like a shadow. Jacob, a young man of 20 summers, lived in one of the simplest cabins of the village. His days were spent hunting, tending to the modest plot of land behind his home, and assisting his father in repairing fences and tools. On this particular morning, he moved with a deliberate slowness, his mind preoccupied with the rumors that had been whispered over the past week. Rumors of a rival group from the northern settlement, armed and determined, approaching the borderlands to assert claims that were long disputed. He walked to the edge of the clearing that led into the dense forest, eyes scanning the horizon. The trees, ancient and towering, stood like silent sentinels, their branches whispering secrets to one another in the morning breeze. Jacob's hand rested on the hilt of a hunting knife strapped to his belt, and though his heart beat steadily, a quiet unease crept through him. The peace he had known since childhood felt fragile, as though it could shatter at any moment with the wrong touch or the wrong word. Across the settlement, preparations were already underway. Elder men gathered near the largest cabin, discussing strategies in low voices, their faces edged with concern and the fatigue of experience. They spoke of alliances, of warning signals, of the need to defend not only the land, but the fragile sense of order that had allowed the village to survive winters, floods, and previous skirmishes. Women carried buckets of water from the stream and handed them to those setting traps along the boundary lines, their movements efficient but silent, as if even the birds might overhear their urgency. By mid-morning, the first signs of the northern group's approach became visible. A distant shimmer of movement among the trees, the crackle of underbrush disturbed by heavy boots, and then a series of muted signals flags and banners not unlike those used in previous encounters brought the village into a tense readiness. Jacob, standing with a small contingent of men, felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. These were not mere rumors. These were neighbors, possibly once friends, now adversaries, moving steadily closer with intent clear in the determined set of their shoulders. Time seemed to slow as the two groups faced one another. Across the shallow valley that separated the village from the advancing forces, the wind carried with it a scent of damp earth and smoke, the latter from fires hastily lit along the edge of the woods as precautionary signals. Every man and woman knew that words alone could no longer resolve the tension. It had reached a point where action, unavoidable and raw, would determine the days to come. Jacob glanced to his left, catching the eye of Samuel, an older companion who had fought in skirmishes before, but whose face now betrayed the weariness of many winters. They shared a nod, unspoken understanding passing between them. They were ready, but readiness did not quell the anxiety that wrapped itself around Jacob's chest like cold iron. The first shot rang out just as the sun reached its zenith, a single gunfire echoing across the hills. It was a signal and a warning all at once. The northern group, clad in patched leather and wielding crude but deadly weapons, surged forward with a mix of practiced coordination and raw desperation. The villagers, who had until now maintained a fragile calm, responded with barricades, strategic positioning, and the steady aim of rifles and muskets that were seldom used except in moments of dire necessity. Jacob moved with careful precision, crouching behind a stack of hay bales while keeping his knife within reach. He could hear the shouts of men, the clash of wooden shields, the sudden thud of someone falling to the ground. Each moment stretched, heavy and loaded with possibility. The sound of boots pounding the earth, of arrows whizzing through the air, became a rhythm, relentless and consuming dot in the midst of this chaos. Jacob's mind wandered briefly to simpler times, the first time he had hunted in these woods with his father, the laughter of children chasing chickens across the yard, the quiet evenings spent by the fireplace listening to tales of old conflicts and distant wars. Those memories, though fleeting, gave him a strange sort of clarity. The world had changed, but he had to endure, to act with courage and precision. For the sake of all who relied on him, hours passed in what felt like an eternity. The battle ebbed and flowed, a grim dance of strategy and survival. The northern forces attempted to flank the village, moving silently along the tree line. But the defenders anticipated their tactics. Traps and barricades slowed the advance, giving the villagers crucial time to regroup and counterattack. Jacob found himself in moments where he moved almost instinctively, ducking, striking, and then retreating to assess the next threat. The midday sun began to descend, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Dust and smoke mingled in the air, creating a hazy veil that blurred friend from foe. Yet, amidst this confusion, moments of clarity emerged, quick decisions that saved lives, courageous actions that inspired others, and the undeniable sense that this small village, though beleaguered, would not yield easily. As the day waned, both sides began to show signs of fatigue. Shouts became fewer, movements slower, and the harsh rhythm of combat softened into the tense stillness of survival. Jacob, wiping sweat and grime from his brow, noticed the northern group beginning to retreat. Their formation broken, morale diminished by the villagers' resilience. The immediate danger lessened, though vigilance remained paramount. By dusk, the battlefield was littered with evidence of the day's conflict. Broken weapons, trampled earth, and the faint, lingering scent of smoke and blood. Villagers moved carefully, tending to the wounded, reinforcing their defenses, and quietly mourning the losses that had occurred. Jacob, exhausted and reflective, walked through the remnants of what had been a day of chaos, aware that this small but intense confrontation had altered the fabric of their community forever. Night fell, bringing with it a fragile peace, The sounds of the forest returned, though tempered by the memory of conflict. Fires burned softly in the village, illuminating faces drawn with fatigue and quiet relief. Jacob sat outside his cabin, staring into the flickering flames, thinking of the morning mist that had seemed so serene, now transformed in memory by the heat and tumult of battle. The war had been small, almost insignificant on the scale of nations. Yet, for this settlement, it was monumental. It had tested their courage, unity, and resilience. The memory of this day, and the small war that had shaken the Midlands, would be recounted for generations, a testament to the struggles of those who lived, fought, and endured in the uncertain times of early America. As Jacob finally rested his head, the night wrapped around the village like a protective shroud. The wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a lone owl called out, a haunting but gentle reminder that life, in all its fragility and resilience, continued. And in that moment, he understood that history was not only written in grand battles and sweeping events, but also in the small, seemingly ordinary acts of courage and endurance that shaped the course of entire communities. The morning after the skirmish arrived with an eerie quiet. The usual chatter of villagers, the clatter of tools, and the laughter of children were subdued, replaced by a tense, reflective silence. Jacob rose early, the weight of exhaustion still pressing on his limbs, his body aching from the hours of combat and the constant alertness that had defined the previous day. Each movement reminded him of the battle, the sudden jerks to dodge, the strain of holding his weapon, the sound of cries that would not leave his memory. He stepped outside his cabin and was greeted not by the soft mist of yesterday, but by a faint frost that had settled overnight. The ground was uneven, trampled in places where both friend and foe had fought, leaving marks like scars on the land. Broken arrows, splintered shields, and discarded musket fragments littered the grass. Jacob's eyes lingered on a small, torn flag of the northern group lying near a cluster of stones, a symbol, he thought, of both conflict and the fleeting nature of victory. As he walked through the village, he saw neighbors emerging from their homes, faces pale and drawn, hands trembling as they carried water, gathered firewood, or assisted the injured. The elder men, who had orchestrated the defense, moved with a solemn precision, surveying damage, checking fortifications, and quietly offering guidance. Every action seemed measured, deliberate, as though the smallest mistake could unravel the fragile peace they had fought so hard to preserve. Jacob found Samuel near the village well, bandaging a young boy's leg. The boy's face was streaked with dirt and tears, his eyes wide with lingering fear, the innocence of childhood shaken, but not yet broken. "Morning," Jacob said softly, his voice hoarse from shouting and exertion the day before. Samuel looked up, nodding, his eyes tired but resolute. "Morning, Jacob. We survived. That's what matters. Now we rebuild." Rebuilding was no small task. The northern attack had not only caused physical damage, but had unsettled the very rhythm of daily life. Fences were broken, crops trampled, and storehouses partially destroyed. Yet, the villagers approached the work with determination. Every swing of the hammer, every patch on a roof, and every cleared path through the forest became a declaration. They would not be broken by fear or aggression. Jacob spent the day assisting wherever he was most needed, helping to repair cabins, reinforcing fences along the perimeter, and carrying supplies to those who could not manage on their own. Each task required patience and care, for a careless step could injure the fragile community further. As he moved, he overheard quiet conversations among the villagers. Some spoke of fear that the northern group might return, others of strategies to prevent future attacks, and a few whispered about sending envoys to negotiate peace. By midday, a group of men had ventured toward the forest to scout the northern settlement. Ensuring that no immediate threat lingered, Jacob volunteered to accompany them, eager to understand what had provoked the attack and whether it could happen again. They moved cautiously, stepping over fallen branches, avoiding disturbed nests, and listening for any hints of danger. The forest, which once seemed a comforting presence, now felt watchful, almost alive with memory of yesterday's violence. Hours later, they returned with news. The northern group had retreated further into the hills, their numbers diminished, and there was no immediate plan to attack again. Relief washed over the village, but it was tempered by the knowledge that peace was always fragile, and vigilance would remain necessary. Jacob felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride in their resilience, sorrow for the friends who had been wounded or lost. The afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the village. Children emerged from homes, hesitant but curious, their laughter slowly returning as they mimicked the movements of adults, learning the lessons of courage, cooperation, and endurance. Jacob watched them, a soft smile touching his lips despite the lingering weight of yesterday. He understood that these small moments of normalcy, of continuity, were the true victories after conflict. By evening, the village gathered near the central fire, not in celebration, but in reflection. The elders spoke of courage and responsibility, recounting events of the skirmish and emphasizing the need to preserve knowledge, to honor those who had acted bravely, and to teach the next generation the importance of unity. Jacob listened quietly, thinking of every face he had seen during the battle, the determination, the fear, and the quiet heroism that had carried them through. Night fell with a different rhythm than the previous one. The silence was deeper, layered with contemplation rather than relief. Fires burned in steady, controlled patterns, casting shadows that danced across the faces of the villagers. Jacob returned to his cabin, sitting outside with the knife he had used carefully cleaned and placed aside. He stared at the stars beginning to appear in the clear night sky, feeling the vastness of the world and the smallness of their village, yet understanding the significance of each life within it. Sleep came slowly that night. Jacob's mind wandered between memories of the skirmish and thoughts of the future. He imagined how the village would grow stronger, how friendships forged in crisis would endure, and how the lessons learned in struggle would shape every decision to come. The rhythm of the forest, the whispering wind, and the occasional hoot of an owl reminded him that life, though tested, persisted. As the hours passed, a gentle understanding settled over him. History was not only shaped by great empires and legendary battles, but also by small, often overlooked conflicts that tested human resilience. The story of their village, the battle of a single day, and the courage shown by ordinary people would echo quietly in memory, a testament to endurance, unity, and the quiet, persistent heartbeat of community. The morning after the villagers' tentative peace, Jacob woke to a sky tinged with muted gold. The air was still cool, but the weight of yesterday's battle lingered, invisible yet pressing, like a shadow that refused to leave. Even as he stepped outside, he could feel it in the uneven soil underfoot, in the quiet hush of the forest, and in the occasional rustle of leaves that seemed to murmur reminders of what had transpired. The village, though alive, moved with a subtle caution. Conversations were softer, footsteps measured, and every glance seemed to carry a hint of unease. Jacob walked toward the center of the village, where the elders had begun assembling for an early discussion. He noticed the subtle signs of recovery already taking place: men repairing fences, women sweeping paths, and children cautiously returning to their play. Yet, even amid the familiar rhythms of daily life, the scars of the skirmish were visible. A roof still bore the remnants of broken shingles, a fence post leaned awkwardly, and the trampled crops were a quiet testimony to the fragility of security. The elders spoke quietly but firmly, their voices carrying the weight of experience. "We must consider not just defense, but prevention," one said, his eyes scanning the assembled villagers. "We cannot wait for conflict to come to us. We must understand it, anticipate it, and prepare for it." Others nodded solemnly, aware that the small skirmish had revealed vulnerabilities that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. Jacob listened carefully, realizing that the village faced more than physical reconstruction. They were rebuilding trust, courage, and confidence, the invisible framework that bound them together. Some of the younger men whispered doubts about whether the northern group might strike again, their voices tinged with fear that Jacob understood all too well. It was a fear born not only of memory, but of uncertainty, a recognition that survival required more than strength. It required wisdom and foresight. By midday, the task of rebuilding became tangible. Jacob and several companions worked to repair a section of the boundary fence that had been completely destroyed. They lifted heavy timbers, fitting them together with care, their movements deliberate and methodical. Every nail hammered, every plank aligned, was an act of resistance against despair. The work was exhausting, yet Jacob found a strange satisfaction in it. It was a way to reclaim control, to affirm that life and order could resume despite chaos. While working, Jacob's thoughts drifted to those who had fought alongside him: the courage, the mistakes, the moments of hesitation, and the flashes of ingenuity. He recalled Samuel's calm presence, guiding younger men through tricky maneuvers, and the unexpected bravery of villagers who had never held a weapon before. Each memory reminded him that the battle, while harrowing, had revealed a deeper layer of human resilience. As afternoon approached, a messenger arrived from a neighboring settlement, carrying news that brought both relief and a subtle tension. The northern group, it seemed, had retreated further into the hills, their intentions unclear, but seemingly non-aggressive for the moment. The elders received the report solemnly, recognizing the temporary nature of relief and the continuing need for vigilance. Jacob and the other villagers were encouraged to remain watchful, aware that peace, like the morning mist, could dissipate swiftly under the wrong conditions. By evening, the village had regained a semblance of normality, though it was a careful, measured normality. Fires burned in central areas, casting warm glows that softened the day's labor, and the sounds of conversation returned, quiet but steady. Jacob sat outside his cabin, watching the stars emerge one by one. The sky, expansive and eternal, seemed to offer perspective, a reminder that even amidst small conflicts, the larger rhythms of life continued. Jacob reflected on how the skirmish had altered relationships and perceptions within the village. Trust had been tested, courage revealed, and loyalties reaffirmed. The younger villagers, especially, had witnessed firsthand the fragile nature of security and the necessity of cooperation. Lessons had been learned not from instruction, but from lived experience, and they would shape the community for generations to come. Night deepened, carrying a solemn hush that enveloped the village. The forest seemed quieter, almost respectful, as if it too had absorbed the echoes of battle and now bore witness to the tentative recovery. Jacob lay awake for hours, listening to the distant hoot of an owl, the soft rustling of leaves, and the occasional sigh of wind through the trees. These simple sounds, when filtered through the lens of memory, became profound markers of endurance and continuity. By the first hours of dawn, Jacob rose again, ready to assist with continued repairs and preparations. Each day, though physically taxing, offered subtle reassurance. The village was standing, the people were resilient, and the memory of courage could outlast fear. As he worked alongside others, he noticed small acts of kindness emerging: shared food, gentle guidance, and moments of humor that cut through the lingering tension. These were the quiet victories, less celebrated than triumphs of battle, but far more enduring in their impact. As the day wore on, Jacob thought of the northern group, pondering what had driven them to conflict and how understanding such motives could prevent future strife. He recognized that survival was as much about foresight and diplomacy as it was about defense. The villagers' ability to rebuild, to communicate, and to anticipate danger would define their strength in ways that a single skirmish never could. By sunset, the village had transformed into a place of cautious hope. The broken fences stood firm, paths were cleared, and the wounded were tended with skill and care. Jacob, weary but resolute, understood that this period of reconstruction was as vital as the battle itself. Every repaired roof, every mended fence, every shared meal contributed to the invisible scaffolding of resilience. As the final light faded, Jacob stood alone for a moment, contemplating the future. The memory of the skirmish, vivid and unrelenting, would never fully leave him, but the knowledge that the village could endure, adapt, and grow in response to adversity brought a quiet comfort. History, he realized, was built not only on the events that shook the land, but also on the daily acts of courage, care, and perseverance that allowed life to continue. The next morning brought a different kind of stillness, one less fraught with fear and more layered with reflection. Jacob awoke to the soft chirping of birds and the pale light filtering through his cabin window. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and wood smoke, a comforting reminder that life, despite yesterday's violence, continued. He rose slowly, muscles stiff from the previous day's labor, and stepped outside to take in the village's renewed rhythm. Children were already playing cautiously along the edges of the central clearing, their laughter tentative but gradually gaining strength. Women moved purposefully, tending to gardens, repairing garments, and carrying water in wooden pails. Men gathered in small groups, exchanging quiet conversation about repairs, future plans, and strategies to ensure safety. The atmosphere was one of cautious optimism, underscored by the subtle weight of memory reminders of the skirmish that had shaken their world. Just days before, Jacob found Samuel near the stream, inspecting a small wooden bridge that had been damaged during the fight. "Morning," Jacob said softly. Samuel looked up, his face showing the weariness of both physical labor and emotional strain. "Morning, Jacob," he replied. "We've survived, but we must stay vigilant. Today, we plan not only to repair, but to fortify." Fortification became the focus of the day. Villagers worked in coordinated effort, placing stakes along vulnerable paths, clearing brush to improve sightlines, and reinforcing cabins with whatever materials were available. Jacob carried bundles of wood, hammering them into place alongside others who shared his determination. The work was grueling, yet each action carried a quiet satisfaction, a reassurance that they could shape their destiny through diligence and cooperation. Amid the labor, personal stories emerged. Jacob overheard conversations that revealed the human cost of the conflict. A mother grieving a son who had fallen, a father mourning the loss of a neighbor who had been more like a brother, and younger villagers expressing a newfound respect for the courage shown by those they had once considered ordinary. These stories, woven through the daily labor, created a tapestry of shared experience, binding the village together with threads of empathy, memory, and resilience. By mid-afternoon, Jacob took a moment to walk along the outskirts of the village, where the forest met the cleared land. He paused at a small hill that overlooked the valley, observing the patterns of life below. From this vantage, the village appeared both vulnerable and defiant, fragile yet resilient. He noticed the northern settlement's distant hills, still cloaked in mist, and reflected on the delicate balance that existed between communities' neighbors, who could just as easily be allies as adversaries. As he descended back into the village, Jacob was greeted by the sounds of collaboration, tools striking wood in rhythm, voices offering guidance and encouragement, and the occasional burst of laughter from children who had begun to reclaim their sense of normalcy. He joined a group reinforcing a section of fence near the northern edge, aware that every nail hammered and plank positioned was both a practical measure and a symbolic act of endurance. Evening arrived with a soft amber glow, bathing the village in warmth. Fires were lit in communal areas, and families gathered to share food, recount the day's progress, and offer small comforts to one another. Jacob sat quietly beside the fire, reflecting on the transformations he had witnessed, fear giving way to determination, doubt replaced by purpose, and despair softened by the tangible acts of care and collaboration. As darkness deepened, Jacob wandered toward the small chapel at the center of the village, a place of reflection and quiet solace. Inside, the air was cool, carrying faint scents of wood and candle smoke. He knelt briefly, not in formal prayer, but in silent acknowledgement of survival, courage, and the ongoing responsibility of community. Thoughts of those lost in the skirmish surfaced: friends, neighbors, and even the distant faces of adversaries who had fought for reasons they might have deemed just. The acknowledgement of shared humanity, even in conflict, weighed heavily, but offered perspective. Later, back at his cabin, Jacob sat by the window, watching the stars emerge one by one. The night air was crisp, carrying whispers of wind and the distant hum of nocturnal life. Sleep approached slowly, each memory and thought a soft thread weaving into the fabric of his consciousness. The day had been filled with labor, reflection, and small victories. And yet, the future remained uncertain. There was comfort, however, in the knowledge that vigilance, unity, and quiet determination had transformed fear into preparation. In the deep hours of night, the village slept with a fragile but enduring sense of peace. Fires burned low, the occasional creak of timber and rustle of leaves punctuated the darkness, and Jacob's thoughts drifted between the past and the future. He considered what steps might prevent further conflict, how the younger generation would remember these days, and the lessons of courage, patience, and endurance embedded in every action taken. By the first light of dawn, Jacob rose once more, ready to continue the work of restoration and preparation. Each day, though heavy with labor and contemplation, brought subtle reassurance. The village remained standing, the people remained steadfast, and the story of courage, survival, and quiet determination continued to unfold. The days that followed the skirmish passed in a rhythm both familiar and newly weighted with awareness. Jacob awoke to the muted sunlight filtering through the mist, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and burning wood. The village had settled into a careful cadence, one that balanced labor with reflection, survival with foresight. Every action, from tending gardens to repairing homes, was informed by the memory of conflict, shaping a consciousness that was vigilant yet patient. In the village square, the elders convened regularly to discuss both practical and communal matters. A new council emerged, composed of voices that had been quiet before the battle. They debated not only fortifications, but the distribution of resources, the sharing of knowledge, and strategies for long-term resilience. Jacob observed quietly, understanding that these discussions, while mundane to an outsider, were the foundation of future security and harmony. Children, who had once roamed freely without concern, now learned to navigate the village with awareness. They played games that mimicked the strategies and movements of the adults, unknowingly internalizing lessons of cooperation and alertness. Jacob watched them with a mixture of amusement and gravity, recognizing that the innocence of youth was being tempered with lessons necessary for survival. Yet, their laughter persisted, a gentle reminder that life's continuity was resilient, even under the shadow of fear. Jacob's own responsibilities grew. Beyond physical labor, he became a mentor to younger villagers, guiding them in skills both practical and strategic. He taught them how to reinforce structures, maintain weapons safely, and observe the forest for signs of approaching strangers. Each lesson carried not only knowledge, but the weight of lived experience, the understanding that theory alone could not prepare one for the unpredictable realities of conflict. Personal relationships also shifted in subtle but profound ways. Bonds forged in crisis were strengthened. Trust became a currency more valuable than gold. Jacob noticed neighbors offering aid without hesitation, listening without judgment, and collaborating without ego. Small acts, a shared meal, a hand lifted to help clear rubble, a comforting word became potent symbols of community resilience. Even disputes, once heated and divisive, were now tempered by the memory of shared vulnerability and the understanding that unity was essential. Midway through the week, a delegation from a nearby settlement arrived, seeking counsel and offering friendship. Their elders spoke of similar struggles with neighboring groups and shared strategies that had worked elsewhere. The villagers, once insular and cautious, listened attentively, exchanging knowledge in a manner that signified not only practicality, but a subtle shift in social awareness. Jacob participated in these discussions, learning as much as he contributed, recognizing that the survival of their community depended as much on connections beyond their immediate borders as on their internal fortifications. By the weekend, the village had begun to establish new routines. Morning work sessions were paired with communal meals, allowing for both productivity and reflection. Evenings featured gatherings where stories of bravery, error, and learning were recounted, each narrative reinforcing the values of courage, patience, and cooperation. Jacob found solace in these sessions, seeing how collective memory and shared wisdom strengthened the social fabric, preparing the village for uncertainties yet to come. The longer-term impact of the skirmish also became evident in subtle ways. Fields were replanted with greater attention to defensibility and resource management. Paths and lookout points were carefully mapped, blending utility with security. Young men and women trained not only with tools, but in strategic observation, understanding how terrain, weather, and timing could shape outcomes. Jacob, participating alongside them, appreciated the deliberate patience required. These measures would not produce immediate results, but over time, they would create a safer, more resilient community. As evening fell on the 5th day, Jacob walked along the edge of the village, where the forest met the cleared land. He paused to reflect on the distance traveled, not in miles, but in understanding. Fear had given way to cautious confidence. Chaos had been tempered by deliberate planning. Yet, beneath every act of restoration, there remained an awareness of fragility. Life was enduring, but vigilance and care were eternal companions. By nightfall, fires burned brightly in communal areas, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with memories of both struggle and triumph. Villagers gathered, not merely to celebrate survival, but to solidify connections, exchange knowledge, and recognize the quiet heroism embedded in daily life. Jacob sat among them, listening to whispered stories of bravery, whispered regrets, and shared lessons. Each narrative reinforced a simple truth: the strength of the village was not in its walls or weapons alone, but in the relationships, trust, and collective wisdom cultivated over time. Jacob returned to his cabin under a star-strewn sky, the air crisp with the coming night. Sitting by the small fire outside, he contemplated the lessons of the past week, the strategies that had saved lives, the courage that had emerged unexpectedly, and the unspoken bonds that now held the village together. Sleep approached slowly, a gentle companion after days filled with labor, reflection, and subtle transformation. In those quiet hours, Jacob understood that history was often shaped not only by dramatic events, but by the enduring choices, daily acts, and careful preparation of ordinary people. The skirmish that had shaken the village was now woven into the fabric of their collective identity, a reminder that resilience, foresight, and unity were as vital as courage in facing an uncertain future. The morning sun rose slowly over the village, casting a soft golden hue across the repaired rooftops and freshly cleared paths. Jacob awoke with a quiet sense of purpose, the rhythm of the past days guiding his movements with deliberate calm. The air carried the faint scent of wood smoke and blooming spring flowers, a gentle reminder that life continued even in the aftermath of conflict. The elders gathered at the central square, their faces marked with experience and the subtle lines left by difficult decisions. Today's meeting was different, less about immediate repairs or defense, and more about the future. A sense of determination hung in the air, mingled with a quiet acknowledgement of the lessons learned from the skirmish. Jacob joined the circle, aware that these discussions would shape the village for months, if not years, to come. One elder, his voice steady and measured, addressed the assembly. "We have survived, but survival alone is not enough. We must ensure that our community can endure, that our children grow up with both safety and knowledge, and that our village remains strong, even in the face of uncertainty." Heads nodded in agreement, and the discussion turned to the formation of a more structured leadership system. Roles were assigned. Some would oversee defense and observation, others resource management, and a few were entrusted with teaching younger villagers essential skills for survival and strategy. Jacob found himself drawn into the conversations about observation posts and forest patrols. Though he had learned much during the skirmish, he now considered the long-term implications. How to maintain vigilance without breeding fear. How to encourage cooperation while respecting individual initiative. And how to integrate younger villagers into practices that would sustain the village. Each suggestion he made was considered thoughtfully, reflecting a growing respect for the balance between preparation and trust. By midday, Jacob and a small group of men and women ventured to the edge of the northern boundary, examining old paths and potential vantage points. The forest, familiar yet slightly foreboding, stretched in every direction, its shadows deepening the sense of both mystery and responsibility. They mapped routes, noted obstacles, and discussed methods of signaling if threats approached. Every detail mattered: timing, terrain, weather, and even the behavior of animals could influence outcomes. Returning to the village, Jacob noticed subtle shifts in relationships. Trust had deepened not only between those who had fought together, but also among those who had simply worked alongside each other in the days of reconstruction. Shared labor, shared vigilance, and shared reflection had created bonds that were difficult to articulate yet undeniable. The village, once fragile and reactive, now moved with a sense of coordinated intent. Evening brought a softer pace. Fires burned in central areas, casting warm light over faces marked by fatigue yet illuminated with quiet satisfaction. Conversations flowed between practical updates and storytelling, blending reflection with teaching. Jacob listened to the tales of bravery from the skirmish, noting how the recounting of experiences strengthened social cohesion. It became clear that the village's identity was no longer solely defined by survival. It was increasingly shaped by resilience, wisdom, and collective responsibility. As night deepened, Jacob walked to the edge of the forest alone, gazing at the northern hills where the previous skirmish had begun. He considered the larger forces at play: neighboring settlements, natural obstacles, and the unpredictable nature of human behavior. The lessons of the past week and a half were clear. Preparation, observation, and unity were essential, yet flexibility and empathy were equally important. Understanding motives, anticipating actions, and fostering collaboration were as critical as fortifications and weapons. Returning to his cabin, Jacob settled beside the small fire outside, the night air crisp with the scent of pine and damp earth. He reflected on the changes that had taken place. The village had not only rebuilt physically, but had transformed socially and mentally. Leadership structures were taking root, cooperation had deepened, and the shared memory of conflict had become a source of collective wisdom. Rather than lingering fear, sleep approached gently, with Jacob's thoughts oscillating between past challenges and future plans. The night carried a sense of continuity and calm, tempered by the awareness that vigilance must persist. The village had endured, adapted, and strengthened in response to adversity. Each day's choices, from small acts of repair to strategic planning, contributed to the foundation of resilience. By the early hours, the village rested in a quiet balance. Fires burned low, the wind whispered through the trees, and distant stars reflected off the frost-dusted rooftops. Jacob lay awake briefly, appreciating the subtle victories that had been won. Trust reinforced, skills honed, and a sense of identity solidified. History, he realized, was shaped not solely by battles and dramatic events, but by the deliberate, patient cultivation of community, courage, and knowledge. The dawn of the seventh day broke with a calm that felt almost sacred. Jacob awoke to a sky painted with pale pinks and gold, the soft light illuminating the village in a way that made every roof, every fence, and every path appear renewed. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine, wet earth, and the subtle warmth of morning fires. For the first time since the skirmish, there was a quiet sense of completion, though not in victory alone, but in endurance, adaptation, and hope. Villagers moved about with purpose, yet without the tension that had defined the past days. Children ran freely, their laughter light and unguarded, chasing one another along the cleared paths. Women worked steadily, tending gardens, preparing meals, and assisting with final repairs. Men carried out their tasks with efficiency and calm, reinforced by the knowledge that the structures and strategies put in place would sustain them. If danger ever rose again, the elders convened one final time to mark the culmination of their recovery efforts. Jacob joined them at the central square, observing the expressions of quiet pride and reflection. The discussion was not urgent, for the immediate crisis had passed. Instead, it focused on lessons learned, responsibilities assigned, and the vision for the village moving forward. Plans were made to train younger villagers more systematically, to maintain vigilance without fostering fear, and to strengthen alliances with neighboring settlements. The narrative of the skirmish's chaos, courage, and resolution would now serve as a permanent guide for future generations. Jacob spent the day walking through the village, observing the tangible and intangible changes. Broken fences had been mended, paths cleared, lookout points established. Beyond these visible improvements, however, he noticed the subtle transformations, a deeper sense of cooperation, strength, and trust, and the unspoken understanding that each person's contribution mattered immensely. These shifts, though quiet, were far more enduring than any fortification or weapon. He paused near the edge of the forest, looking toward the distant hills where the northern group had retreated. The memory of conflict lingered, but it no longer held the weight of fear. Instead, it carried lessons strategic, emotional, and communal. Jacob understood that the village's survival had depended not only on courage, in the moment of battle, but on patience, foresight, and the consistent effort to prepare for uncertainty. As evening approached, a communal gathering took place around the central fire. The villagers shared stories, some humorous, some solemn, all infused with the depth of lived experience. The youngest children listened intently, eyes wide, absorbing lessons without fully understanding them, while adults reflected on the courage and resilience that had carried them through. Jacob observed quietly, feeling a profound sense of connection to the past, to his neighbors, and to the larger rhythms of life that bound them together. The night was clear, stars shimmering above like scattered diamonds. Jacob walked through the village one last time before retiring, noting the faint glow of fires in windows, the gentle sounds of conversation, and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. Everything felt balanced, a fragile, beautiful equilibrium born from struggle, reflection, and collective effort. Returning to his cabin, Jacob sat beside a small fire, letting the warmth seep into his tired body. He reflected on the journey of the past week, the chaos of the skirmish, the labor of reconstruction, the forging of trust, and the deliberate cultivation of resilience. Each challenge had revealed the strengths of the village and the depth of human courage. Even in ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Jacob lay back, staring at the ceiling of his cabin, listening to the nocturnal symphony of the forest. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the distant sound of a stream all were reminders that life continued, steadfast and persistent. Sleep approached gently, not as an escape, but as a continuation of reflection, rest, and readiness. The village, though small and once fragile, had emerged transformed. Walls were stronger, plans more deliberate, and relationships fortified by shared experience. Yet, beyond the tangible improvements, Jacob recognized a deeper victory, the cultivation of wisdom, courage, and unity. The skirmish, small in scale yet monumental in impact, would forever echo in the hearts of those who lived through it, a quiet testament to the resilience of ordinary people faced with extraordinary circumstances. As the night deepened, Jacob finally closed his eyes, feeling the soft weight of exhaustion and fulfillment. The village slept under the protective gaze of stars, a place no longer defined solely by fear or uncertainty, but by endurance, preparation, and hope for the future. And in that moment, he understood the profound truth that history is often written not just by great battles or sweeping events, but by the steady, deliberate acts of courage, care, and perseverance that sustain communities through the trials of time.